online. So, hello, Roger. Good to see you here. And we also have Philion. Hello. Same here. As well as people are missing my streams. That's Joshua. Good to see you. And from Wisconsin, who else do we have? Solo Diggity. Thank you for the compliment on the thumbnail. I'll be talking. There's a little man in there called Cern Abbas. I'll be having a little chat about him in a minute. Who else? Eric, welcome. There's no sound. Did someone say there's no sound? Can you hear me? Hopefully you can hear me. Let me just see. Oh yeah, there is sound. If you can't hear me, then that's probably problem is your end. Oh, right, okay, right, excellent, excellent, all good. All right, thank you, Sarah. Hello, hello, Helen. Thank you for letting me know. Excellent. Oops. Also, there's so many messages. Everybody's just zooming past. I can't keep up. But I'll try. So yes, welcome. So this is becoming a bit of a habit, isn't it? I'm every couple of weeks now, I seem to be doing a live stream, and I'm enjoying them. Hopefully you are too. Hello, Brian. Welcome. And Esmail. Hello. It's good to see you. Some of the patrons and YouTube members are here. I really appreciate your support and all the questions you're giving me and asking me. It helps tremendously. Give me ideas for research. So yes, I think this is something I'll continue for the foreseeable future, at least every couple of weeks. But it's just finding topics to talk about, and it's the members and the patrons that start. But by the end of it, if you have questions, just put them in the chat. Start them off with the word question, if you can, or a Q, and that'll help me see that there are questions. What you can pay super chats, I think they're called, for questions if you want. You don't have to. I'm not here to make money. I'm really here to just educate and tell stories of interest to you all. So so today what we're going to talk about today, we are going to talk about a giant who is often seen naked. We will probably talk about the world tree a little. If we can, we will talk about Cernunnos, a video I've just made that some people would have seen. And we can, depending on the number of questions I get from you, we can go through some of the most popular mythology questions and go through those. So hopefully you'll find all those of interest. So let me see. Everybody's looking good. I don't know how many people we've got online, but we've got a few of you, and that's all that really matters. But yes, so certainly if you've got any questions here, let's say just put them in the chat, and I will do my best to answer as many as I can. Hello, Avery, and Nadia. Yeah, so put your questions in the chat, and I'll do my best to answer as many as I can. I can't necessarily get to them all, and I don't necessarily see them all. The chat is on the side of the screen. I have to explain this, and I'm not looking at it. So you all tend to talk to each other a lot while I'm talking, and discussing ideas and thoughts and the like. And because I don't see them, I don't know to answer questions there and then. But when I finish talking, I'll go back to the chat, and I can take some time scrolling through that chat. Hope that makes sense. So yes. So what do I want to talk about? First off, I want to talk about a giant. So we have, this is a bit of news that came out. It's been sort of dripping out of the last month or two following the discoveries, but it's been in the news. I think it came out formally yesterday, if I remember rightly. And this is, let's see if I can get it up, about this chap, Cern Abbas. Now, Cern Abbas is a giant made of a chalk. It's a chalk drawing on a hillside in Britain, and it's been there for a while, and we had really no idea who he was. And it was a he, because I have masked out the bit that made it. Us definitely know it was a he, because I didn't know if YouTube would be happy with me having such a large, expressive piece of maledom on the screen. But yeah, so this figure, to give you an idea, is about 55 meters tall and about 50 meters wide from hand to hand. And if you look at it, it looks like potentially a warrior with a club. And so, yeah, and that's been the thing. How old is this warrior? It looks quite primitive. Perhaps it's as old as 2,000 years old. Perhaps it was done more recently as a joke because of the ballast that I've hidden. And what has happened is a group of people from a sort of an organisation called Time Team that used to be a TV show, but now they do a more independently run sort of project. I don't know how they get their funding. I know they use patrons and YouTube and the like, but they did some work on Cernunnos, and to find out if they can find out any more about the age and what this giant is. So what they found out was the chalk drawings made between 700 and 1100 CE, and that really stumped people. Yeah, that's right in Anglo-Saxon times in England. So why have the Anglo-Saxons drawn this? It doesn't make sense. It isn't really an Anglo-Saxon type figure. And then what we also found out is that the Abbey, Cern Abbey, where this giant is, the Abbey's built at the sort of foot of the giant, was built around 987 CE. And from there, they said that this giant was of a local hermit, St. Yadwald, his name would have been. And everybody's like, okay, St. Yadwald it is, the hermit. But what happened is when they looked at what was going on, they realised that the drawing had been altered, probably by monks of the Abbey, to remove some features that we would recognise. You see, Cernunnos is actually Heracles. And I've tried to make a Heracles look like Cernunnos. But what's happened is that Heracles, we would usually have a lion's mane on him, like a lion's hide from his adventures, and it would drape over his shoulders. And what has happened is that Cernunnos, as we see it now, used to look possibly something like that. I haven't yet to see the real estimates, but that is what it looked like. So that is sort of the latest news about this phallic image you may be familiar with. And I'll talk about Cernunnos in a minute, but I'll see there's some questions already. So let's talk. Let's see what you have there. So question. My screen's got a bit wonky. Question. Is there a solid resource that the world is translated? Sorry, the question isn't fitting on my screen. Let me see if I can fix that. Right. Is there a solid resource that the world tree is translated into in the zodiac in parts and pieces? I looked up the Celtic trees and they rule at a time of year. Let me see if I can. Is there a solid resource that the world tree is translated into the zodiac in parts and pieces? Oh, right. So, yeah, it makes sense of that. I looked up the Celtic tree and how the rules and time of year. So, I am going to talk about the world tree. So, perhaps let me go through the couple of questions here, and then we can dive into a discussion on the world tree, what it means, the mythology behind it. And we can go there and go exploring if you want from there. But in short, I'm not sure the world tree and the zodiac are connected. But yeah, we'll look at that in a bit more detail in a minute. There's a question from Sarah. Hello from Texas. Hello, Texas. So, have you enjoyed my videos on first beliefs, gods, and creation myths? Are there any outliers, cultures whose beliefs are completely different? Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. So that was going to come up actually in looking at some of the sort of general mythology questions, but we can talk about that. So not everybody will have the same beliefs. You have Christianity and you have Hinduism and you have uh, First Nation Australians and First Nation Americans all believe very different things. Now, sometimes we find stories are similar, and the stories are similar because either they have come from the same source, which makes them very old, but there aren't too many stories we can have confidence where that happens, but there are some, predominantly creation myths and myths of death and the sort of core myths, as I would call them, and how the world came to be. But then we find certain motifs are repeated many times. So because they are considered sort of, I don't know, fundamental to how we think about things. The sky is always above our head. Rivers always flow into the sea, so to speak. So we will hear stories that may have similar sounding properties, these motifs, but the stories, in fact, may have a whole different purpose. Because the idea of myths is that they're trying to tell a truth. All myths are true, but they are only true to the people who believe the myth, which sounds really obvious to say when I say it like that. What I mean by Christian stories are considered the truth by Christians. Hindu stories are considered the truth by Hindus. But a Hindu may not believe a Christian story, and a Christian may not believe a Hindu story. So just because someone believes a story is true doesn't mean it is actually factually accurate and true for everybody in the world. It's just true for the people who believe the religion, the culture that wrote that story. So I hope that makes sense. Thank you, Jennifer, for signing up to the YouTube membership. Much appreciated. What's going on here? So hope that makes sense. So the question from Avery is: Cern Abbas a leftover from Romans when Romans ruled Britain? It's a leftover from the Anglo-Saxons. So the Romans had left Britain, Anglo-Saxons are here, and if they've drawn this large picture of Hercules or Heracles, why have they done that? And there is some thought that perhaps it was a meeting place for armies. I would say that because there is an abbey being built at the bottom of this image, that site had some sacredness to it, because we find religious buildings, like certainly in the Abrahamic world, tended to be built on top of pagan sacred sites to help, when pagans came to worship their gods, they could no longer do that. They'd have to turn up to this, well, in this case of England, a Christian church. So that's where that's from. And so, Heracles does suggest there's some heroic event, which, could be warlike going on, but perhaps there was some sacred ground there, or a ritual site that's now lost underneath the very original abbey that may offer some clues. And I'm not too sure if the time team dug under there to tell us. Sorry. Right. So in terms of so the outliers and cultures as well, is there anything else I can really say about those, apart from, if you're not familiar with the mythology database, I've created a website called mythologydatabase.com. If you look for mythology database in Google, it should come up as probably the top hit, and that allows you to search for narratives or motifs or mythemes. And if you do that, it will allow you to see the geographic distribution of the narratives that have that motif or mytheme or the words in you want. So you could search for I tend to use fire dragons, and it will say, are there fire dragon stories told in these places? So dragons of fire. And so what you can see is that maybe there's only a restricted scope of people that talk about things, and in other places not. And actually, when I talk about Cernunnos, which is the antlered-headed god, then we see that too. So you may be familiar with Cernunnos. So can I put a picture up of Cernunnos? Will it let me? I don't know if I'm. Yeah. Oh, there we go. Let me look at this technology. So you might be familiar with this Cernunnos, who looked a little. I don't know if I've got a realistic picture of him. So this antlered deity is quite famous, certainly in Europe. And if we actually study where he was known, it was really only in Europe. Now, he may be holding things that have influence from other areas. Certainly, this image is actually found on a cauldron, and the cauldron was made probably by the Thracians by the Black Sea, and includes influence from the Near East. This has got lions on it, for example. You don't find lions in Europe when this was made. So there's influence from the Near East there. So you find that some motifs flow from places and land in a narrative space, but they aren't part of the cultural beliefs. So hopefully that sort of puts something in context. But the mythology database is really a really good place to start. And if you don't know that database, I could perhaps even put it on the screen and show you that. I don't mind doing that because I've done that a few times here. But yes, so yes, everybody believes different things, and that's part of being human. And telling stories about them is part of being, human too. And it's absolutely, well, it's why I do what I do. Sarah, thank you very much for becoming a member of the YouTube membership. Thank you. So you'll get to see some of the videos before the public, and you'll get to see some hopefully posts and pictures as well. So I hope you enjoy that. So I'm just thinking, do anyone have questions about Robert Graves? Not my name, right? So, oh right, yes. So that wasn't a question. So let's see. So here, Jono plays. Hello, Jono plays. Now, I like the idea of tracking motifs, and it makes a lot of sense to me. I've seen some in other scientific fields poo-poo the idea, which is unfortunate. Big gap in understanding of what you're doing. Yeah, so that's a really good point, Jono. So if you go to a folkloristic conference or something like that, and you say, "Oh, I trace the origins and source of narratives." So by that I mean predominantly stories, but songs and alike. A lot of people will turn their nose up to you, saying, "What's the point of doing that? You'll never be able to do it properly." And that's sort of true. Whilst we can give indications of where stories start. So, for example, there's a video of a flood myth, and we have high confidence as the flood myth started about 40,000 years ago in Southeast Asia, about 40,000 years ago, and probably Southeast Asia. That's still quite a large scope. You've got probably plus minus 5,000 years in there, and a whole heap of space. You don't know exactly where it would have started. So there are people who think, what's the point? You're not really adding value. And we had this discussion with Portable Orange. He was on a couple of weeks ago. It was a really good discussion. Thoroughly enjoyed myself. And we had this discussion. So Andrew was saying he would like things to be 100% true, or at least if they're incomplete, to be consistent. And it's really hard to do that with language. So because language is how you translate and interpret what someone says can be subjective, they're not clear. There is some woolliness in what people mean and what it, when did the English language start, for example? At what point? Someone probably said a sentence in English we could understand, maybe modern English, but was that actually right? Did he know words, or she know words that weren't modern English? And so the next person probably could tell it, but perhaps they got a couple of words wrong. And there's a very blurred line on when exactly something that is, so has such a large scope and so many sort of properties and or attributes, you could call it, if you're looking at DNA and the like, you can never really be 100%. but I understand people wanting that. So you do get a lot of poo-pooing, as I think you called it, in the field. But what we do in phylogenetics is convert words into numbers, in effect. So there is some computational, I guess, reliability and consistency as well about the data. And so we can present that data saying, you know, we have split this story up into these motifs, and these motifs are mentioned this number of times in these stories, and therefore they are or are not related. And because what we know about dispersals and migrations and through archaeology and genetics, and because we can see stories change and grow, and we're familiar that some motifs can grow into others, but some motifs can never grow into others. So, for example, we see stories where over time animals can sort of evolve into humans within the story, not actually within the narrative of the story, but a story about a dog with magic powers may turn into a story about a man with magic powers. But rarely do you have a story of a man with magic powers that then changes over time into a story of a dog with magic powers. So by understanding these sort of rules of how stories develop and evolve, we can have confidence in which direction stories evolved into, and that helps us then to sort of rewind that to find where stories come from. So it's yeah, obviously I believe it. It's what I do, but it can be frustrating pushing back against people who share the same interests overall on folklore, but who don't believe that. Yes, but yeah, thank you for pointing that out, Jono. And it's good to see you here as well. I don't know if you've been on the live stream before. You may have a little while ago. So let me just see if there's any other questions. Yeah, so that's a really good point, Esmil, that the most interesting form of Cernunnos, so the one I just showed you, is from Denmark, but it actually isn't from Denmark because, I say, it was made by the Thracians over in Romania. So we have this Romanian cauldron, probably paid for by Celtic patrons, that ended up in Denmark. But either way, Thracians and Denmark are both well away from the core of the, well, I call it the Ten culture. So when we talk about the Celts, it's a very ambiguous term. Many people have many different views on what Celts are, but in terms of the development of what we consider the Celtic language, if you consider that, that corresponds very well with an Iron Age phase of development, which we know as Latin, which comes from around Switzerland and spreads out, and that really maps well onto what we consider Celtic, and that's where most figures of Cernunnos are found. Now, for those of you who are YouTube members, who, especially those who just become members tonight or this afternoon, and patrons, you can watch the video now, which I go over all this. But for the rest of you, the video is going to go live next Sunday, probably about 4 o'clock GMT. So late morning in America, I think that works out as. So yeah, and about sort of early evening in Central Europe, and then you'll get to see how I've dived into Cernunnos and all the different aspects of him and the different visualizations of him, and how actually it may not be him, and in fact Cernunnos may not even be his name. Which is a fascinating story. Certainly, there's many rabbit holes you can go down looking at him, especially the snake he's holding. He's holding a snake in many of the images, and the snake has a ram's head. So imagine it's like a sheep with horns, and that's on a snake. And you've got to think, well, why is there a ram's head on a snake? And that is a rabbit hole that a few people have asked me to go down and tell them more about. But I've tried to express my own opinions of what it is. There may have been influence from the Near East, or I can't find any direct evidence of that. But that it could be a possibility. Certainly, if I spend more time on it and look up some other research, we might find links. But yeah, we'll see. But that's probably coming soon. So let's see. Are there other questions? So here's a question from Henchy a third. Right, is the devil a made-up Christian Catholic thing designed to scare the heathen away from their own god deities so they can follow the one god belief? So the devil really was influenced from Zoroastrianism, which is a Persian or an Iranian belief. So what happened, and is that there, as what we know, the Indo-Europeans, so people who spoke a related language all the way from Iceland to northwest India, sort of Indo-Europeans, those people there, when they had a sort of culture and belief, and as they passed through the Iranian plains, some of them changed their beliefs, and they developed this Zoroastrian belief from probably Zarathustra. Now, before, the world just was, okay, and it came with everything that the world has, and you had to try and maintain its balance. But Zoroastrianism said, actually, the world has good and bad in it, and you have to balance this out. And what we find is that when there's probably the most significant influence is when Cyrus the Great ends up conquering the Near East and what is now modern day Israel. That belief of good and evil flows into Abrahamic religion, and you start seeing this sort of, you've got to be good or you'll go to hell type idea. So that's sort of where it starts. And then talking of Cernunnos, funny enough, so some people confuse Cernunnos with Pan, the Greek god, which has goat's horns, and he's quite a chthonic and potentially erotic and tricky figure. And that figure of Pan is the figure we sort of associate with the devil today. It certainly influenced Christian imagery of the devil. So why did they develop it? It's part of they're thinking of the good and evil thing is a great idea. So what you find is when one culture sees another culture succeed, so Cyrus the Great and his beliefs succeeded over modern day Israel, or what was modern day Israel back then. They thought, oh, well, why are they so good? Oh, look at their God. They've got a God that understands good and evil. And they take that on board and encompass it into their own culture. And that's what happens. It happens all the time. So the best ideas of different cultures gets picked up by other cultures. So hence the Abrahamic religions have this idea of good and evil as well. So it wasn't used to scare pagans into believing about it, but it was for those who believed about the Abrahamic religion to, in effect, act in a particular way. So you could go to heaven. You are rewarded to go to heaven. And Christianity then sort of allowed the rules such that providing you said you're sorry before you died, you can go to heaven, which made it a lot easier to go to somewhere really like a paradise in the afterlife. Providing you didn't, I think it's blasphemy was the one big thing you're not allowed to do. And then that could not be forgiven. So I think that's a good synopsis of where the devil came from and hell and the good and bad. So are there any other questions? So here's an interesting point by Exy Music. So right in the beginning, so over 5,000 years ago, and there is some ambiguity on where it could have started. Some people think it may have even started in the Balkans. So in Europe, before we see it in the Near East. And we can only infer what people were thinking or meant before we get writing. And that's pretty accurate when you're certainly going back 10,000 years plus but just before 5,500 years ago, the imagery we see 5,500 or 5,000 years ago, and that of 6,000 years ago, for example, you can get some indication. And then, much like how language evolves, you can see diagrams or pictures or narratives evolve, and you can make some guesswork and have some confidence. But you're right, the further you go back, we can only make assumptions of what people were thinking and why they did certain things. I mean, we may be spot on some of them, but we may be wildly out on many others. Absolutely. And a really good example of that is within the Luscor caves, where there's a ball with some dots on it, and people thought that was a Pleiades, and the ball represented Taurus. But it now seems like the ball represented a ball, and the stars, or these dots, actually represent the number of moons, so the lunar cycles that would pass within I think it's migratory term, or a fertility or pregnancy term for them to give birth. So it allows people to remember how long different animals move around for. So there's completely different ideas. But even then, whilst that feels really good and we're quite confident on that, we could still be completely wrong. We will never know. So let's carry on going down, see if there's any questions to do. So, all right. So here's a question about Dagda and Cernunnos. So, do we believe that the Dagda is or was an aspect of Cernunnos, or similar to the triple goddess before the Christian monks swept in? Right. So there is zero imagery of Cernunnos in Ireland, and the only imagery we have of Cernunnos in Britain is from a Roman import, or that's what it looks like. Cernunnos seemed really, imagery-wise, in terms of reliefs and stills, tends to be pretty much focused in Central Europe. So the question is, was there a figure at the time of the Ten culture that could have been the same as Cernunnos in Ireland? We don't see evidence of that, or not that I'm aware of. Could there be a figure in Irish mythology that had the same, or some of the same motifs as Cernunnos? We don't see that either in terms of the talks and the sort of ram's-headed serpent. But was there a deity in Ireland that had the same functions as Cernunnos? We will never know, because we don't know the functions of Cernunnos, because Cernunnos has left us no clues on what he was doing. We see this ram's-headed serpent. We see talks, which represent elite status. We see sometimes a stag and a bull with him. We sometimes see a bag of seeds, or there could be coins with him. So there's something probably about wealth and prosperity going on there. Something about probably controlling land or pastoral farming rights and the like, because of the stag and the bull. But really, we can't tell. But we do know there are people in Ireland who were of elite status and had wealth, but we don't know if there was a deity there that they would worship to or respect in terms of that, and whether that was related to Cernunnos. So we just don't know. It looks unlikely, because Cernunnos was literally seems to have been around for about 500 years before he disappeared. But the imagery is because they got this imagery on the Gundistrup cauldron. That's so. Let me get that up. I don't know, because you may not have been here when we put it up. So this image, let me go back one there. So because we have this image, and it looks fantastic, it's very memorable. That has been sort of stereotypicalized as a typical Celtic god, but it isn't a typical Celtic god. It is a god from a specific period and a specific geography with specific motifs, but our functions were unknown, and even that god's name we're really unsure of. We're not 100% sure of anyway. So I hope that helps by not telling you anything because you don't know much about it. So, right, let's keep going down to see if there's questions. Right. I can't say anything. So if you say write question at the front of your note, then it's a lot easier for me to pick them out. Oh, here we go. Here's a question. I haven't read it. Right. So, Bouldergast, hello. Do you think Pan derives from a Proto-Indo-European god named something like Hernos, or the Vedic Pushan, or Latin Faunus? That is a good question. Let me just sip a tea. So, I have to be honest and say I am not entirely sure. I think Pan seemed to be a localized deity, from my understanding, from the Arcadia Mountains, which are at the southern tip of Greece. There's a sort of almost like an island attached to Greece, and there's the Arcadia Mountains on the north of that island, or that peninsula, I guess you'd call it. And Pan came from there, and the only reason Pan became famous, I believe, is that after, it may have been the Persian War, or there was someone had some dream of this god in Athens, and it became more famous in Athens. So, because of the localized nature of Pan, and because we don't see Pan particularly elsewhere in that form in the Indo-European landscape, in terms of this anthropomorphic goat, you could call it, or figure, because Cernunnos is quite different, because Cernunnos is a man who has antlers, as opposed to an animal with some human body parts. So Pan is quite different. Pan is a sort of definitely a hybrid creature, person. So yeah, no, I think there may be similarities in terms of motifs and functions within other gods, but in terms of the names, I'm not convinced there would be some relationship in there. So I hope that helps. But I say I'm not an expert on Greek mythology or Pan, because it is so complicated, and I'm always scared to go in there because I may never come back if I delve into the Greek mythology. But I sort of half promised YouTube members and patrons that I may dive into that, because I do get a lot of questions on it, and it is really fascinating. No, so no, the Abrahamic religion, when Persia was in there, so Cyrus the Great took over Jerusalem. Excuse me, that's my tea. That's when we see this happen. It didn't happen in Samaria, from my understanding. Anyway, right. So there's another question. So, DBK, hello DBK. Right, lots of familiar faces tonight. So I hope you're all doing well. Quick one, might we think that the dualism of Zoroastrianism derived from the same dual or tri-realms of prior tradition, the astral heavens and the chthonic underworld, and our middle world? I mean, obviously there's influence there, because there was the Indo-European religion, and then that was sort of replaced in effect with Zoroastrianism. But Zoroastrianism couldn't completely replace some of the motifs and real core beliefs that the Indo-European religion had. So we still see traces of some of these motifs in there, such as the flight of, I say Xanadu, that may not be the correct pronunciation, which is the aspect of creating balance sort of in the cosmic order in terms of the tripartite system. But there's other aspects like Gaia Martan, or Gaia Mart, and we can see a definite etymological high or evolution from Yimo, who is meant to be the twin who was sacrificed to create the world, and that name persists within Zoroastrianism. So yes, there will be Indo-European influence within Zoroastrianism, but Zoroastrianism did its absolute best to try and remove as much of it as possible. So it would really take someone like I think it's Mary Boyce is probably one of the foremost authors on the work. There are others. It's probably you need someone who's done a lot of expert work on that to really unpick the amount of influence there at DBK. So yeah, but there certainly was some, but I don't think it was. It was significant, but it was significant in the sense that they were trying not to replicate it. So let's see if there's other questions. So I'm just reading these. All right. So, man of the jacuzzi question: do you know why Hinduism survived and the European religions died? Well, it's not quite that simple, I don't think. So the Vedic culture sort of evolved into Hinduism. There was changes, but it did evolve, and all these religions evolved. So what we see is Zoroastrianism sort of. I think there's a few people who support Zoroastrianism still today, but in terms of paganism in Europe, there's still some. So we do see that, but what we see is the Christian church, certainly with the Christian church, coming into definitely Europe and maintaining some of the mythology and the rituals within their sort of belief system. But it's been so long since that's happened, we don't really recognize that these are pagan rituals. You hear people talking about trees at Christmas, for example, being pagan, which there isn't really too much evidence to say bringing a tree into the house is that. But there's other things like blowing out candles. That's a ritual. Where does that come from? The drinking of wine and bread at communion. That is a sacrificial ritual, blood sacrifice ritual. So what's happened is that the religions haven't necessarily died out completely. They've just been transformed and some incorporated into other beliefs. And so the question is, why then is Hinduism so much probably nearer its original Vedic form, which still had evolved from the original Proto-Indo-European aspects of it compared to others. And that could be partly because the remoteness of it, partly because in terms of sort of influence, much of there was so much, I guess, churn in Europe in terms of different empires, from the Persians and the Greeks and the Romans and the like. It means there was probably a lot of cultural, well, not replacement or dispersal per se, but there probably would have been society evolved to allow things and forget other things, and more rapidly than maybe in Northwest India, and that's primarily why. I think it's just that Europe's had a lot of people want to control different parts of it, and that's really the bottom line, is that society and landscape changes myths, and myths are the religion, and because the European landscape has remained the same as a whole, it must be society that has changed to lose that, and society changes when there is a cultural change. Normally governments, leaders, kings, something like that has happened to change that. And one of the most dominant ones is the Roman Catholic Church, really enforcing that within Western Europe. And in Eastern Europe, you have the Orthodox Church, but that has kept far more of the old mythology. So there are many old stories we see in Eastern Europe that have God and the devil in them, where God and the devil have replaced old pagan deities, or even primordial, even Paleolithic potentially beings, because the stories are that old, which you don't necessarily get in Western Europe. The stories have just been completely rewritten, and there's various reasons for that. In England, we had, England has gone through a lot of transformation. We had the what would have been the indigenous population here, whenever that probably 40,000 years ago, we find traces of humans here. They then got wiped out when the glacial maximum happened around 20,000 years ago. So no one was living in Britain. And then people came from Europe onto Britain, so hunter-gatherers. And then we had agricultural farmers come to Britain. Then we had pastoral farmers come into Britain. And then you get the Romans come to Britain. And then they leave and you get the Anglo-Saxons come to Britain. Then you get the Normans come to Britain. So there's just lots of layers, lots of cultural changes. And you find at different aspects, different people write different stories to give credibility to why the people who are there running the place are now there running the place. And so you find these complicated creation myths with lots of sort of probably wars or even patricide and matricide and the like. And when you get to older stories, incest and all these sort of things, just to give some credibility as to why a particular king or queen is ruling the land. So I don't know if that really helps, but it really is just what people do. And I think Northwest India was subject to certain changes, but and influences, but not as much as the rest of sort of Iran and through Europe from the steppe, the Caucasus steppe, and the Pontic steppe. Pontic steppe, I mean. So let me whiz down to any more questions. Question. Right. All right. So who's asking this question? Nadia. Hello, Nadia. Right. Do Chinese hells derive from Zoroastrianism as well? Oh, that I don't know. But that's also a really broad question. So when you say Chinese, China is a big land, and Chinese is a long period of time. So now maybe try to sound a little pedantic here, but we really have to put things in context to say what we mean by something, because religion changes over 500 years. I mean, look at Cernunnos. Cernunnos survived really in historical terms 500 years. So, and only in Central Europe, really. So 200 years before that, no one would have heard of him. 200 years after that, they've probably forgotten, not completely, but dominantly. So, yeah, I don't necessarily understand, but did Zoroastrianism influence China? What we do find is that there is a story called I think it's the myth of Pangu, where the world is sort of born from an egg, and there's two aspects to it, two parts to it. There are some, such as Bruce Lincoln, who suggest that could possibly have Indo-European influence into it, early Indo-European influence, because we do see Indo-Europeans migrate across in Asia. So there may be some influence in it that also influences Zoroastrianism, but I wouldn't say that is direct. It may be that Christianity influenced, or maybe trade from Jewish traders influenced it. I think it's less likely that it was Zoroastrianism migrating to China, certainly as part of pastoral farming migrations. If it did migrate, it would have been trade, and I would guess that would have been slightly later, because the Silk Road was slightly later, and I'd imagine most of the trade would have come via that route. So I hope that helps. Thank you for. I've seen lots of things, lots of messages saying great answer. So thank you for different things. Let me try and find the next question. I don't know how. You guys have some great conversations here. So DBK, hello DBK again. Right, syncretizing and in the Viking Age or earlier in their common roots. What relationships or analogies do you see in the Celtic Tuatha Dé Danann? All right, and with the Germanic. Okay, so how close was Ireland with the Germanic peoples. And my feel is there's definitely Indo-European influence in there. I mean, to me, the biggest influence you read is in the Tane. Have you ever read that? Brilliant book where someone has to drive cattle across Ireland, and in effect, the landscape is made by the dead body of cows, which is, you could argue, is really reminiscent of the sacrifice. We see the primordial sacrifice at the start of the Indo-European creation myth. So there's definitely Indo-European influence in there, and Indo-Europeans influence the Germanic, and call them the Celts, if you wish. There will be some influence from Spain up there, but there will be influence from what we would call Britons, so pre-Roman inhabitants of Britain, who were pushed to Wales and Cornwall and Scotland, and almost certainly over to Ireland in that, and they would have been pastoral farmers, so the Indo-Europeans as well. But they're just, how much of the two-thirds land comes from Celtic or not, it's hard to say, because we don't have any real literature of Celtic mythology. So that's part of the problem of Cernunnos as well. We have no myths of Cernunnos. We don't know what he did, so we don't know his functions. So, but where we were lucky enough to have some Christians write down some of the myths, we do have some relics of Irish mythology, but it'll be really challenging to say what is the same as Germanic and what is Indo-European. So what's the early sort of pre-split, and there is some pre-split. So you see the loss of an arm, we see the landscape built. So there are key motifs in there. I don't know if anybody's actually, someone must have written a book about those. If not, that needs to be done. And I'm just seeing, let me just check my bookshelf if there's anything like I can't see anything like that. You'll probably have to go to like a monograph or one of the similar books. In fact, give me 1 second. I'll give you a reference. So, sorry about that. So there's a book, a set of books, Celtica. I don't know if you see that. Great books. I think this one is tells me about Swivney, because I was suggesting that Swivney was never a god, and a couple of people said to me, yes, he was, read this. But yeah, you'll find, basically, it's really good to look up papers if you want to get into the detail of some of these things, because unfortunately there's a lot written about Celts and Ireland that isn't necessarily as accurate as it should be. It isn't of a high academic standard. So I'm not saying that everything's like that. There are some really great authors, but it's really, what would I say? It's preferable if you're doing research to look up the papers and say Celtica is one. So just Google Celtica monograph. And you that may help you to do that research, because they may have things about what could be Indo-European. So let's see if I can see any other questions, and then I don't know. Sorry. And I love reading all your comments. I really need to go through these after the show, because this I'm missing out on all of this. Hello, Life Art Times. Welcome. I don't know how long you joined. Here's a question. Right. So, welcome to the Real. Has asked, what kind of gods would pre-Roman ancient Britons have followed. So pre-Roman ancient Britons were, the Britons immediately before the Romans came over, were pastoral farmers with significant amount of Indo-European influence. There would have still been some possibly some agricultural farmers hanging around, depending on what time frame we're talking about. Certainly no hunter-gatherers. And so if we have the Indo-Europeans and the Indo-European gods, I've made a fair few videos now on that, but they would have a sky father and an earth mother. The earth mother video I released last week to explain who she is and how old she is and perhaps where she even came from, which was potentially thousands and thousands of years ago. And then these had children, and the children would have been the goddess of the dawn. There was some divine twins. But then we also see primordial beings, Manu and Nemo, that create the world. We have gods of the underworld, from Kylo to Nemo becomes lord of the underworld. And then we have things like the sun and the moon, also considered aspects of sort of deities, which may not have been siblings to people like the thunder god or the divine twins. So it was that set of gods that I expect most Britons to be aware of, but there would have also been very localized versions of gods as well. We see that quite a lot, that communities would have had localized gods because certain things happened in those communities, in specific to the landscape, that they would have needed help from, and so they would have created a deity to help them. Or that's probably not. They would have to do something. So how religion really starts is something happens, you have to do something to get something done. Let's say you have to go somewhere to fish in a particular way, and that's the way you do it, and then you create a story about this is why you do it that way, and then that story then is told, and you enact that story as a ritual, which is the way you are hunting fish, and then that's how sort of religion begins. That story of hunting fish becomes the myth, really. So yeah, that's the first gods were, or the gods before the Romans were predominantly the Indo-European ones, but there would have been localized ones as well. Next question. Fauna Sanctum. Hello. Question. Greetings to you. Can you think of any examples whereby a mythological figure serves as a goddess of memory, or as the collective memory of a people? That's an interesting question. Serves as a memory. You hear gods tell stories of history. That's not the same as being a memory. Certainly, in my specialisation of Indo-European, we don't see that. But I could argue you might start seeing that perhaps in First Nation Australians with Dreamtime. That might be part of that. Yeah, they look into some other world or spirits, or I don't know if you'd even call them deities in their culture, that feeds the knowledge of the universe. Certainly I'm not aware of a story, a myth, where we see a god give memory to people. I mean, you have Adam and Eve who have no knowledge, and then they eat fruit and they get knowledge, and there's all sorts of questionable things about that process. Why did God not give them knowledge and then put a tree in a garden with knowledge and to tell them not to eat the tree, and then put a snake in the garden that knew that it was knowledge who would convince them, Adam and Eve. So, but I can't think of any fauna. Sorry, to disappoint. But certainly in the Indo-European landscape, I can't think of one. Perhaps First Nation Australia might be a place to look for that if you're interested. But that's an educated guess by me, to be honest. So, Brian, hello, Brian. The Gabella states, in the reign of Firbolg King Rindal, who reigned for 6 years, weapons got their points. Is this an oral memory of the creation of the spear 30,000 years ago? I would say not. So the spear was created long time before that. And I think I may be wrong here. This may be an old wives' tale and I could be spreading misinformation, but the word sin comes from the word to miss. So it was a sin to miss. So if you're hunting and you throw a spear and you miss, that's a sin. And that sounds like something that is fundamental because of the value we place on the word sin today. So, to my understanding, spears have been around a long time, but what happens is as cultures change and different leaders come in, you have to sometimes recreate the reason why you have things. So, a really clear example of this is bead in England. So the Anglo-Saxons have come to England after the Romans left. So Britain was pagan, these Indo-Europeans. Rome comes along, sort of adopts and mixes and merges some of these, and there's an influence of Christianity coming along too. But then the Romans leave, and then Christianity goes, pagans come back in, paganism comes up, and then the Anglo-Saxons come along, who then have pagan beliefs, but then convert to Christianity. And then what has to happen is that how can England have a creation myth that is pagan? How can that persist? You can't have that because England is now a Christian state. So Bede writes a creation myth for this new England to say why certain things have happened, and so why the Anglo-Saxons ended up winning the war against the Britons, to make England what it is. So you find that cultures will create and replace mythology with updated versions to make sense of their current beliefs as beliefs change. So I hope that helps, Brian. So that's not interesting story mythology, but I very much doubt that is specifically related to that. But very, very interesting though. So let me see if there's more questions. I want that book, Helen. Are you talking about the Celtica book? I can send details. Message me on Patreon and I'll send you the details of it. Okay. Right. So DBK again. Hello. Right. Talking with you is so rich in an intellectual nudging. I can't thank you. Oh, well, thank you very much. Sorry, I thought that was going to be a question. Well, thank you. I love talking, answering questions, and I mean, I don't know how to express it sometimes. I'm not very good at expressing how I feel. I haven't got that sort of mind. But the joy and fascination one should have seeing how we share stories and how they are related across the world, and how we share, laughter and jokes, and wanting people to be well and to be happy, and to have these stories, and that the stories make people feel in a particular way. That is almost magical to me. And to understand those stories and what they mean and why they're there is just doubly so. And that's and I just love like talking about it. And I'm just really passionate about it, and I hope that comes across. That's why I do this. I think people really underestimate how amazing stories are, mythology and folklore, and what it really means to people. But yet it means it to everybody across the world. We all have this need, and we all come from the same source. We're all humans, and it just blows my mind how we got here and have all these links and can trace them and find the same things fascinating. Yeah, that's why I do what I do. There's probably a better way to explain it, but to me, it really drives me. It's my peace to be hear and read and write and talk. It's yeah, and I really appreciate people appreciating it. Thank you. So yes, let me whiz down the questions. Right, Esmil, of course I'm going to answer a question from you. Right. Question: Western Zoroastrianism has a big push to not sacrifice cattle. Indeed. Does this indicate there was cattle sacrifice in Vedic religion at this time that was polemicizing? It was polemicizing against, i.e., was it pushing back against the Vedic culture? Now, what I believe was going on here is that, and you've probably heard me talk about this before, is that cattle were really important 7,000 years ago. This was before we could ride horses, before we had wheeled transport. The pastoral farmers, so we hear about the Fertile Crescent and the Near East and the start of farming. That's agricultural farming. But in the Pontic Caspian steppe and around that region between the Volga and the Dnipro rivers, we see farming, but pastoral farming of animals. And the farming of the cow was the most important, but for two reasons. One, the cow itself just seemed to be 100% created for humans, in the sense that it was all useful. Every part of the animal was useful. So you could use the hide for clothes, you could eat the meat, you have bones, it could be tools, the dung could be fertilizer, the urine is antiseptic. You could even drink the milk it made. It's baby's food. It's but people looked at it, and the cow was an absolutely perfect animal. So that's why it was worshipped and considered so important. And because it gave so much, it was very valuable. So what people wanted was more cows. And how do you get more cows? You kill a cow and offer it to a god to say, here's my best cow, please give me more cows. That was the crux of it. And then you get the mythology around that. So there's a cattle raiding myth of a hero called Trito, which we can find in Heracles, and we can find in Thratiana, I think it's in the Vedic, where a hero goes out, and even David and the Philistines in the Bible is a version of this. I mean, you see in America, in Africa, in the Sans culture, where a hero goes out to kill a dragon or something like that to rescue cattle, because in the sense that anybody who had cattle that wasn't you must have stolen it, because it wasn't rightfully theirs, because your God made cattle for you. That was much the aspect of how important cattle were. So you got this proto-Indo-European belief of you kill something to create balance in the universe, give back to the universe, and the universe will give you more of it. So that's why you were killing cattle. So we have this push, and I think what has happened is that perhaps, yes, the first Indo-Europeans going into the northwest India to form the Vedic culture may well have sacrificed cattle, because that was part of the Indo-European landscape. But because the nearest sort of trading neighbours that they were culturally felt similar to were Persians or Iranians, and there's Zoroastrianism, and Zoroastrianism sort of had this change in the world to worship or look after the cow, that then influenced the Vedic culture as well. They took that spirituality. In effect, I think as Indo-Europeans migrated into northwest India and they were passing through Iran, they were picking up this more spiritual, passive vibe, I guess you call it, like this religious belief, and that brought that down. That's how I interpret it, because when the people who migrated the other way into Europe didn't have that at all. They were sacrificing cattle whenever they could to get more cattle. So I think it's very much happened at a migration stage, because you very rarely would find, if the Pontic Caspian steppe is the homeland of the Proto-Indo-Europeans, that those who migrated into the Iranian plains and down into northwest India would come all the way back up back into the Pontic-Caspian steppe and then into Europe with that belief. So that doesn't make sense. So to me, it's certainly as people migrated, they took that more passive spiritual belief with them, rather than Zoroastrianism actively changed that belief. I think that was just a natural development because that was being influenced from Zoroastrianism. I hope that makes sense. But it is something I've thought about a bit. Why in Hinduism is the cattle sacred? So if you're not aware, put context around this. The cattle is sacred in Hinduism. You don't kill cattle. So, and which is the real opposite of sacrificing a cattle to get more cattle. So it seems really weird. Like it's absolutely the opposite of what people were doing early on in terms of the religious beliefs. But that's to say that definitely feels like Zoroastrianism influence, but it's really just part of, I think, the spirituality and passive feeling not around that as part of the migration, because people migrating down would have had those views. So yeah. Right, let me look for more cues. Let me. I can't find any more. There must be more questions, I would have thought. Hello, Heather. Welcome. And so I'm just looking for questions. Please bear with me one moment. As I say, I love the fact that you were all talking. But I'm missing so much to take in. Right. DBK, another question. Breckenford, that's me. Is it true that Alexander the Great came across an early form of Beowulf while traveling and conquesting the East over by Afghanistan, India? I would think that is very unlikely. Now, he may have come across a story that may have had similar motifs and myth themes to Beowulf, but no, it's unlikely. No, but we do see, in terms of stories that are shared, probably the most famous one is the Mahabharata and the Iliad, Odyssey. So there's a whole set of epics. So the Iliad and Odyssey in Greek culture are just two books of a number of books, really great epic work. And unfortunately, we've lost all the other books, but we know they existed because there's hints of them and names of them talked about in other texts. So we know there's this great volume of work that we've lost, and only the Iliad and Odyssey remain. But we have the Mahabharata in India, and if we look at that, which is an epic, it's a huge amount of books, in fact, probably twice as big as the Greek version. There's lots of similarities there. So we know there are certain stories that were told in cultures, vast epics that would have taken weeks to tell the whole story. And probably no one could have told the whole story. You probably had different people associated with different aspects or different chapters of the book. So what you'll find is that, you just find people would have learnt those from an earlier source and probably an original source, maybe 2000 BCE. This story's jury's still out. It's hard to say, but there is such commonality in certain details between the Mahabharata and the Odyssey and the Iliad that they could have only come from a single source. It would be so incredibly unlikely that they just came up with exactly the same ideas as to be, almost impossible to believe. So certain texts maybe, but Beowulf, I don't believe, was one of them, DBK. That's a long way to answer that. So no is the answer. Let me find a Q. Now, is that a question? I'm just looking for Qs. That's quicker because there are so many messages. So there was a question, right? Caroline, hello. Do you know where the baptism of children comes from? Saving from hell makes sense for Christianity, but it looks to be an even older tradition in Norse and Sami cultures. So, initiation, a ritual initiation, that's what baptism is. Ritual initiation has happened for thousands and thousands of years before Christianity. But it can happen in different ways. Some people, may be dunked in water, as in baptism. Some may have to go on a trial. So we see, in terms of becoming a man, we see that boys have to castrate a bull. So in Sayburch, in Turkey, there is one of our oldest, if not oldest, narrative reliefs shows a boy who has castrated a bull. And then in an image next to it, which is part of a narrative scene, shows the boy becoming a man. I'll only let you imagine how they show that. I think I've probably made a video about Göbekli Tepe and the like on my YouTube channel. So this is probably about a year ago I made that. So this was going on. Now, in fact, I don't know if I can do this. Let me in fact, I'll show you something, because I was talking about Cernunnos earlier. So let me load something. I can show you a very interesting picture, which may help explain this. Can I do this? So when you look at the cauldron, the Gunstrup cauldron, which had Cernunnos on it, it's made of a number of plates and with different images on. And this is one image. So on the core of the plate, the 2/3 of the right-hand side is an army marching. On the left-hand side, you've got someone who is dressed very similarly to Cernunnos, but this person is holding a smaller person, child potentially, dressed in the same dress as Cernunnos and dipping his head in a cauldron. Or he could be sacrificing the baby or child in a cauldron and maybe make a child soup out of him later. Who knows? But we don't know. But it could well be an initiation where someone's dunking someone in water. That's from 500. That's actually from between 400 BC. Is it? How's I know about. Actually, I've got that wrong. The cauldron's from about 1st century BCE, but it shows that that's 100 years before Christianity. And certainly before Christianity came to Europe, that the dunking of someone in a liquid was a ritual behaviour. So it could be that, there are aspects of that ritual all around the world that have just independently sort of evolved. It's unlikely to come from a single source and spread all over the world, but certainly, maybe that other cultures see these rituals and think, well, that's a good idea. And certainly there is an aspect of water in Indo-European culture as being, and rivers being as a method of cleansing them. Not just because it's water and water cleans you if you're muddy, but the reason we have the sea is salty is because all the sins and illness in our bodies, what the Indo-Europeans used to do, or the Proto-Indo-Europeans we believe did, would, if they're ill, you'll wash yourself in the river and all, hopefully the poisons and horribleness out of you flows out of your body into the river and goes to the sea. And that's why the sea tastes salty and horrible, because it's got all that poison and muck in it. And river water is clean before that. So that may be a motif of why then that could be taken to say, actually, we use this cleansing as a way to baptize, but actually, so before baptism and welcome to the world of God, it could be a way of sort of cleansing you and making sure you're almost pure to take on the role of whatever you need to take on as part of that initiation. So that's my thought on that. I hope that makes sense. That's off the top of my head, but that would be where I'd come from on that question. So I hope that makes sense, Caroline. But thank you for that. That's good. That's a good question. quite appropriate from what I've been talking about recently. So let me I'm looking for more cues. The cue. Oh, blimey. Here we have History with Hilbert. So, hello, Hilbert. If you don't know Hilbert, he has a YouTube channel where he makes fantastic videos of animations and talks about various historical events. Well worth a follow. Had a good chat with him a week or so ago about YouTube, because we're all finding it a bit of a challenge at the moment. So much AI material coming into YouTube. YouTube has to find a way of showing you all the videos to make sure which ones are great. And because the extra quantity of videos people are seeing means that YouTubers like ourselves are now less well seen. So, I used to get between probably 50 and 150,000 views on an average video, and now I get maybe 15 or 25,000 views on a video. It's and that's all because of things are changing. So it's always good to talk to other people. But hopefully Hilbert and I will have a chat in the future about Tacitus. That's something we talked about. I think he's probably currently sunning himself in Fiji, so I am somewhat jealous of his current state. So we'll move on before I get too jealous and start being sad that he's living a happy paradise life with palm trees and the like. But yeah, follow him. History with Hilbert. Absolutely fantastic videos. Right, let's see if I can find another question. Oh, there you go. So Hilbert is probably better read on Beowulf than I am. Something maybe 5th century. Okay. So that's interesting. I mean, that would make sense. I mean, the motifs could probably be even older still, but in terms of that having a coherent story together, yeah, that's very interesting. Right. Let's see. Any more questions? Hello, Ellie Vesta. Says hello, John. I'm still looking for questions. How do you guys keep up with all the chat? I don't know. There's so much. Yeah. Yes. Oh, yes. There we go. So Hilbert saying good to catch up. Talk about exactly colder climes. Yes. So we'll enjoy Fiji, Hilbert. I'm not jealous at all. But yeah, I love to talk about Tacitus and anything else. Come to that. Right. Oh, right. So I'll think about the bottom of the chat. Oh, right. Here, and there's a question. Right. Dare the Bear. Eric. Hello, Eric. I found an obscure reference about October the 7th being the Scandinavian Day of the Bear. I've not been able to find any corroborating information, and I'm curious if you've heard of anything. Now, I always get a bit suspicious about specific calendar days representing an ancient festival, because until Christianity came along, also certainly the Romans at least, so anything older than 2,000 years, we didn't really have a calendar to say October the 7th. So it was normally a lunar event or something. But what I know we do have, particularly in Eastern Europe, is there are festivals of the bear. And some of them still go on today. Luckily, many of them have changed so that people dress up in bear costumes rather than use bears, because there's still some people use real bears and there's cruelty associated with that, and it's awful. But some people dress as bears. You can find videos. In fact, some of my older patrons would have seen videos I've posted of dancing, because I love watching people dance. The culture around dance is fantastic, and I've posted pictures of people dancing. I think dressed as bears and that. So we do certainly see that in Eastern Europe, and so that wouldn't surprise me through the Slavic regions that we see very similar things in Scandinavia. I wasn't aware there was a specific day in Scandinavia, but I think it's something that could be very possible. Where would you find that out? They're generally called calendar rituals. So I don't know if there's a better phrase for that in Scandinavian, like wherever you are, Norway or Denmark or Sweden or even Iceland. But look for a book on calendar rituals and see what that says, and that may uh, help you find out what the bear day is. And certainly, I might try and look that up myself to see if I can relate it to the Eastern European bear day. So if you're aware, I do a bit of work with a folklorist called Crowhag who studies folklore in Transylvania, and she's done a video on the bear, I believe. So she'd be a really good resource to leverage to understand if there is a link there. So yeah. So Day of the Bear, right? So this is interesting. Hello, Nipanor. In Finland, the Day of the Bear is July the 13th, so in the middle of summer. Okay, as opposed to winter. So I know, because I would either guess the Day of the Bear would usually be the bear is going to sleep for hibernating, or the bear has woken up, so be careful. So it would make sense to have days like that. So watch out for the bear. And if the bear hasn't woken up, then perhaps winter will last 6 more weeks, a bit like Groundhog Day. But the middle of July, that's really interesting. Don't know if there's any significance around that apart from the longest. Well, it's a bit far from a few weeks from the longest day. That's interesting. I will certainly do a bit more research into that. That's interesting information. Thank you for that. Look at this. As if by magic, Crowhag appears. That's really spooky and magical and spooky. Romanian Bear Days are celebrated in February and August as part of the folk calendar. For weather forecasting and also aligned to the mating season in August and during New Year's. So July maybe in Finland may be when bears mate, so you have to be more careful, which is why they have these festivals so people are aware not to walk in the woods and stumble across a couple of bears being friendly, because they may not take it too well that you're interfering with their friendliness. But thank you, Ellen. That was absolutely spookily brilliant. Thank you, Crowhag. Right, let me whiz down. Right. It's right. So that's the questions done. As I said an hour and a half ago, I was going to talk about Cernunnos and the world tree, and we're an hour and a half in, and once again I have failed. This is brilliant. I love answering questions, so thank you. Perhaps I will make a world tree video as a long form video, like on YouTube formally. Then that's possibly the way to do that. And then, just like I've spoken about Cernunnos today, I can have a live chat about the world tree when we do that. But just not to leave you disappointed, for anyone who was interested in the world tree comes from some of our, what we believe, oldest creation myths. So those myths, such as like the Earth Diver. So when the world in our oldest creation myths is water, pure water, and on there tends to be an animal, tends to be a waterfowl like a duck, and it dives down into the sea, to the bottom of the sea, and gets mud in its bill and brings it to the surface. And as the mud hits the surface, it turns into land. And that's how land forms in the sea, and that's how we get land. And then that was a pretty common creation myth, I'd say, even around the world. We see it in North America, Siberia, Europe, North Africa. So, yeah, it certainly seems very old. Now, but how does life get on this world? Well, initially, we see probably our oldest creation myth, according to Witzel. So Michael Witzel, professor of Vedic studies at Harvard, wrote a book called The World's Oldest Mythologies. And he believes, and I think it's him, and probably Yuri Berskin has done work as well on this, who has written an analytical catalogue of motifs. He says that the original creation myth had people coming up from inside a tree into the world. So the world was already there, the tree was already there, the people were already there, they just came out of the tree. So the first creation myths actually had no creation, just here are people. But then people want to know, well, how did people get here, and how did the land get here, and how did the tree get here? So creation myths evolve. And so we see land created by this duck who dives into the water and comes back up. And that's land. But then most stories go, well, then plants grow on the land and a tree grows through some magical happening, or stars glittering, or things happening, or wind blowing. And the plant grows, and that plant's a tree. And the tree pushes the sky up from the ground up and creates the gap between the land and the heavens, and then people can come out the tree. And it is that tree that connects the land to the heavens that eventually becomes, I believe, the world tree. It certainly is probably a motif that is adapted for the world tree, and becomes those sort of pillars of the world, and various other forms of that, mountains. You see the myth change depending on the landscape alike. So that's really the origin of the world tree. But some of the stories are really old, and I think you'd really like to hear those. So I can put those in a video, and I can show the development and the evolution of the world tree through these various myths, from trees to mountains to pillars, and the sort of later evolutions. So yeah, that's what to do with the world tree to make up for absolutely failing to say world tree probably once in the last hour and a half. So let me just make sure there's no other questions. Right, yeah, so we're here. So it's been an hour and a half, and it's been a really, hopefully, a chilled evening. I feel like I've talked far too much, but it looks like everybody's had really great conversations. So I hope you're all well. Thank you for my patrons and YouTube members who joined, and all the questions they ask. If you're not a member of Patreon or YouTube membership, please join. There is a free tier, and you'll get a limited amount of sort of vlogs and information. But if you join, you get to see other information, what I do every week, extra research, early access to videos, and they're all ad free, and all other things. Yes. Yeah. And sorry, I just seen Hilbert pop up. Oh, yes. Sorry, Hilbert. Yeah. It's well, it's a real pleasure to see you anyway. Yes. I'll definitely do the World Tree video. But yes, thanks for everybody who supports me on Patreon and YouTube. As I say, the YouTube algorithm has changed so much now. We're getting far less views, and I use that money to invest in the mythology database, which helps students and academics around the world study mythological origins and sources. It's an incredible academic resource. Literally, well, I think we've probably got about 250, 300 universities using it now regularly, and thousands of students. So, yeah, any support you can give me really helps. So thank you for that. Thank you for asking all these questions today. Absolutely fantastic. Some of them have been brilliant. Makes me think. I will research into some of them, a bit more about Bear Day as well around Europe and the like. We'll make a World Tree video. The Cernunnos videos for all those who aren't members and patrons will be available to you all next Sunday. And with that, yeah, just really, I hope you all are well and okay, and take care, and keep reading stories and spreading wonderful myths around. And yeah, I look forward to talking to you all very soon. Okay. Yeah, take care, and thank you so much for coming along and joining this chat. I'll speak to you all, probably do another live stream in a couple of weeks. Why not? Take care. Toodle pip.